So what we want to see now is what happens when an entire institution acknowledges that and reshapes and reforms itself to that end. And then how does that impact test scores, right? How does that impact attendance, right? How does that impact behavior? And then how can we use that leading indicator data, that wellness data, to then shift and adjust and modify for each kid? So my last comment on this is that part of that work is sort of appropriating. If you go into schools, they use something called an IEP. It's an acronym for an individualized education plan. And it's typically for kids who are in special ed or have like special like learning or emotional needs. What we are talking about doing is that every kid in a US public school should have an IWP. Every kid should have an individual wellness plan. Because if we're working that plan and adjusting and responding that plan, and they're consistently getting more well, everything we see in the research and everything we know in practice is that they're going to start doing better in school.
Wow. Thank you so much for breaking that down for us, Jeff. Jeff, we have time for one more question, and it's very open-ended. I'm interested to hear your take. You and I are currently filming this conversation in the middle of April 2025. The Trump administration has had the Department of Education in the news constantly. What is your reaction to the contentious coverage of the Department of Education? What's your gut reaction? What do you think the future holds?
It's scary, right? But I also, like, if I've learned anything over my 30 years, these are moments of opportunity, right? If we can sort of set aside our fear and start thinking about, okay, how do we leverage this to move forward in a good way? Okay. Because at some level, like there's some truth to the fact that like what we are doing in public schools, whether you're talking about at the state level or the federal level, it's not working. It is not working. And the lack of honesty and transparency and the absence of real like rage and discontent about that from our national leaders is and has been very troubling to me for a long, long time. I feel like that the only way that you create like real transformation is by starting with telling the truth. I don't think that that's what's happening right now. Like I don't there's just sort of lies on top of lies on top of lies and that's not the path forward. And so what troubles me about this approach is that it's about tearing down, not about building up. And I don't come from that. Like I come from builders, right? Like I want to build. And I haven't heard anything from the administration about what they're saying to build. Now, this idea that they're going to punt back to states, I'm not necessarily against that. Like I want more local control. I don't want it at the state level. Like I want it at the community level. I think there should be much greater autonomy at the community level to determine what the priorities are for the children that are there. And so there's some potential there. Like if we, right, and the truth is that there's nothing in the US Constitution that guarantees a free public education. It's not a constitutional right, it's a state's right. There's some logic there to me, but the way in which the logic is unfolding is illogical, it's ill-informed, and it's dangerous because what is on the table is really key resources going to language learners, going to special ed, going to the most vulnerable, going to girls and women. They're talking about ripping that budget away. I haven't heard them say, we're not throwing that money away, right? We're going to turn that over to the states and let them make decisions. So if what they're proposing happens, you're going to see a massive, massive catastrophe in public schools because public schools are already severely underfunded in this country compared to some of our like global right rivals or competitors right that actually prioritize public education in a much more meaningful way. So we're already right, you're already watching schools right struggle to make things work, particularly schools that I mean, part of the troubles of this nation is that we've built a school system where those who have the most get the most, and those who have the least get the least. So schools are not the great equalizer, right? They're the great engine for social reproduction. If you take away the federal resources, which aren't a huge part of school districts' budget, but they're big enough and focused enough on the most vulnerable populations that if you take that away, schools are in trouble. And I don't say that like lightly, and I'm not being hyperbolic here. Like this will create massive problems in our public school system. And it's going to be hard to walk that back. A lot of what has come out of this administration has been a lot of shock and awe. And, that's sort of their like modus operandi. If there is going to be a shakeup in a DOE from this administration or any administration, I want to hear first the truth about why. Then I want to hear, well, what's the plan? So that, because if it doesn't have to be this way or it isn't working this way, then what are you proposing? So just pouring gasoline and torching it, that's not a proposition, right? That's shock and awe. That's utter destruction. And that is not what our children and our teachers and our communities need. We need a plan. And until I hear a plan that is actually research based and data driven, then I don't know how to respond to it because they don't have a plan.
Well said. Absolutely. I think we can only hope for the best, you know? Well, Jeff, that is going to conclude our conversation. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.